Excellent. Well, it's 2 o'clock and I'm delighted to be the host this afternoon on today's Institute of Hospitality webinar. I'm really pleased to say that we're going to be joined by two absolute experts who are going to give us a great insight into today's topic. Stewart Moss is the MD, and I would like to say hi and good afternoon to you, Stewart.
Hello and good afternoon.
Excellent. And Karl Chessell. Karl, good afternoon to you.
Hi Sarah, good afternoon everybody.
Excellent. So how we're going to run the webinar as normal is we'll do a short introduction with the panelists. I'm delighted that you both are here with us today. And then we'll go straight into the presentation. I would very warmly welcome any of those on the call today to send through questions as challenging as you like, because I'm sure Karl and Stewart are up for a challenge today. But please do send through any comments, observations, questions, anything you're not clear about. If you send it through into the chat box, then at the very end, once the main presentation is over, we can go through those questions and pose them to Stewart and Karl. So with no further ado, let's get straight on. Stewart, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, my name is Stewart Moss. I'm the Managing Director at High Level Software, which is part of the Zonal family of companies, and I also sit on the executive team there. And prior to that, I had 2 decades in hotel management.
Excellent. Well, you're really welcome. And Karl?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm a director at CGA. We are a data and insight company focused purely on hospitality, and we do an awful lot of consumer research. Partner with Zonal on a quarterly Go Technology report. And obviously we've done a lot of the research behind the key topic today, which I'm going to talk through in a little while.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, thanks so much. And I should point out, of course, that Zonal is very familiar to the Institute members, as for many years now, Zonal have been one of our leading business partners, actually on a silver level. And so we have had some really insightful thought leadership and statistics and publications that we've taken advantage of through Zonal. So it's really lovely to see you both in person. And yeah, if you're ready, Stewart, I'll hand over to you to start the presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sarah. So Zonal and our research partner CGA, who Karl's a director at, have surveyed 2,000 consumers, and we asked them about their habits, experiences and views when staying or visiting hotels in the UK. This report hasn't been launched yet and won't be till the end of February. So today is an exclusive sneak peek into the report. So some of it's top secret till then. But obviously there's a great deal of insights in there that Karl's going to share with you now.
Thanks, Stewart, and hello again, everybody. So yes, as Stewart said, we surveyed 2,000 consumers. So that was a nationally representative sample. So we went into different geographies. We also looked at different age bands, and if you access the report when that's available, some of the report goes into some of the nuances between the different age groups. What I'm trying to do today is give a fairly top-line overview of some of the findings. As Stewart said, a sneak preview, but holding some of the interesting detail back as well. Those surveys were conducted through December and January, so it's really recent research, and the consumers had to have visited or stayed in a hotel within the past 6 months. So those are the parameters of the research itself. And I've got a few different topics to talk about, and then Stewart and I are going to talk a little detail later about how to bring this to life, some of the actions that can be taken to help maximise and drive revenue in hotels. But starting with use and frequency of hotel, we asked the question about why do you currently visit or stay in a hotel, and the top 3 were fairly leisure focused. So 30% of consumers saying it's about exploration, the interest in like to visit new cities, 29% enjoying traveling a lot for leisure, 28% treating themselves or their family. We also found amongst the older population in particular that there was a desire to support UK businesses. So across GB, 23% of consumers said they wanted to support UK businesses. From a business traveller perspective, 14% travelling a lot for businesses, just to give kind of some context of those other numbers. Now, looking at the type of hotel or accommodation visited through 2022, maybe not a massive surprise to see that budget hotel chains from those 2,000 consumers were number 1. so representing 56% of consumers had stopped at a budget hotel. Premier Inn being one example, and was actually the largest example. So around 42% of consumers had stopped in a Premier Inn. If you look at some of those other types of accommodation, so leisure as we defined it, so the places that have spa, hotel, fitness facilities, boutique hotels, generally urban, small, stylish locations, pub in with rooms, all these different types, largely about 1 in 5. So budget hotel very much ahead, but around 1 in 5, just showing the breadth and depth really of the hotel sector. And there's a lot in the report actually about key drivers, but again, just to give a snapshot here, 2/3 of consumers are driven by price and location. So price being the number one, 66% of consumers saying that's a consideration that's important when choosing which hotel to stay at. Location at number 2 at 61%. You can see the stats drop off a little bit, but there are a load of other reasons why people want to stay at hotels. Hygiene standards, really important. Good customer service. Making up the top 5, we've got reviews, and I'll talk a little bit about reviews in a minute. So 38% of consumers looking and considering their decision based on online reviews that the hotel specifically has. And actually down in number 10, taking up the top 10, how the hotel looks on the website. So that's quite interesting that reviews are seen actually as more important than how the website can look, but clearly they're all part of the whole digital journey that we'll touch on later. Going into the bit more detail on this topic of research, booking and social media, what we see is that almost 9 in 10 consumers say they do look at a site's reviews, look at how many stars they've got, or they look in a bit more detail at what people are saying on some of these sites as well. So it's an absolute key part of the decision-making process for where consumers go. So it's important to get that right. It's important to monitor those scores, be responsive to any feedback, positive or negative. And consumers are influenced by social media. 42% of consumers, as you can see on the stat there, usually check a hotel's social media like Facebook or Instagram before booking. It's a really important part, again, of that decision-making process before a consumer decides where to go. And whilst we've not delved into a lot of detail here on the demographic differences, you can see on this slide, 18 percentage point, even more for 18 to 34-year-olds. So 60% of 18 to 34-year-olds are looking at Facebook and Instagram before booking. So a key part of the decision-making process. To the right of the slide, we've got 81% of consumers usually checking which amenities the hotel has before booking. So a much higher percentage, but showing really those core amenities that a hotel has, that core offering, are also critically important and actually more important for the older population. When we look at social media platforms from a booking perspective, I think it's quite interesting. So the number 1, 2, and 3 social media channels for hotels are Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And you can see on the left of those figures that the likelihood to visit those sites I've talked about is quite high. So Facebook being number 1 at 44% of consumers, Instagram at 38%. But I think what's really interesting about this slide is actually very few people have actually booked through social media. You're talking around 1 in 10 across each of those channels. But actually on the right, there is quite an interest in using that channel. So 32% of consumers would be interested in booking through Facebook, 29% would be interested in booking versus Instagram. So definitely a latent opportunity, I think, for hotels to capitalize on that desire to use social media for bookings as well as just for research. And we kind of went into this in a bit more detail, asking what suggestions consumers had to make booking through social media easier, and actually adding a button to book directly through the social media account appealed to 43% of consumers. Looking at receiving calls after bookings was also well received by consumers. So perhaps the perception that social media doesn't necessarily give you that full experience that a hotel website gives you, but actually having a call back to confirm confirm the booking, would be appreciated. Being responsive to messages I've already talked about, and actually something as simple as adding a link through to the hotel's website so they can perhaps make a booking on the site. We also know from the research that hotels are the number 1 place where people do actually book. So 60% of consumers have booked through a hotel's website. But actually, in terms of ease of use, it's actually beaten by third-party websites. Now, debate exactly the detail around that. Some of it, I think, is the fact that it is an aggregator. Some of it might be about ease of use of hotel website as well. Hotel websites do score well on trust, but obviously there is a gap there on that ease of use versus the bookings that are actually being made. There's also, interestingly, quite a lot of people still wanting to call hotels. Forget, of course, that even in this new digital world, there are people that still want the more traditional forms of booking hotels. The area of commissions for third-party websites is obviously an issue for hotels. It means a lot of the money, unfortunately, has to be paid to these third parties. They play a role, of course, but what's interesting is that a lot of consumers don't actually know that this commission, levels of commission going to these third-party sites. So 50% of consumers didn't know that commissions were taken, and actually certainly not to that extent of 20 to 25% of the booking value. And when we asked consumers, once they knew that, if it would make an impact on where they would book, actually nearly 2/3 said that would make them more likely to book directly through the hotel's website. So educating consumers about this, I think we'll touch on this later, but drive and repeat business through direct is obviously going to be a money saver for a hotel, but also builds up that one-to-one relationship with the consumer as well. Next section I'm going to talk about is hotel dining. Feel from the research, this is an area that actually there's an opportunity for hotels to step up. When we're asking consumers about it, 40% of them actually will order, deliver, or click and collect from somewhere else while stopping at that hotel. So you've got people stopping in your hotels that are actually choosing to order food in from elsewhere. So that's obviously a massive opportunity. A couple of the reasons that come up towards the top are perception of the food and drink being expensive in the hotel, lack of variety of food in the hotel. So I think there's opportunity here for hotel operators to get that demand that clearly exists for food. If you're stopping overnight, you need to eat somewhere. If you look through further down the list, we've got a menu not being good enough, quality of food and the drink in the hotel is not good. So it feels like there's an area for improvement here collectively across hotels. Clearly, not all hotels will be in that bucket. Satisfaction generally amongst consumers is high in hotels. So overall visit satisfaction is high, check-in input is high. So we've got 8 in 10 consumers telling they're satisfied with all of these things. So hotels obviously do a really good job. But again, just to reiterate that point, when we move to the lower end of this chart, you can see it's things like quality of food and drink and variety of food and drink where satisfaction levels are a bit lower. So again, an area for improvement. Relates to dissatisfaction, it's a lot lower. So although these charts might look lower, the figures are clearly a lot lower. So we're looking at 80% for the satisfaction levels. For dissatisfaction, we're looking in the 20s. But service is number one, but then quality of food and drink wasn't good is a second on that list again. So showing an area for improvement. There's a few other pain points at the bottom, like lack of entertainment, length of check-in and check-out time, that are worth noting as well. But as I say, relatively low levels of dissatisfaction. The final section I want to talk about was hotel technology. Obviously a big area of what Zonal do, and a real interesting area for consumers, how that balance is made, the right balance is made for consumers. Things like Wi-Fi is now seen as a standard for most hotel users, but people are also looking for other tech in rooms. So the availability of built-in wireless charging ports in rooms, 77% of consumers wanting that. We have 72% of consumers wanting to use tech to communicate about hotel facilities, such as ordering towels or contacting housekeeping. Consumers looking for mobile devices or mobile-enabled devices and tablets to control facilities and tech in the room, to see what's going on locally. So tech is here to stay and is only ever increasing in terms of usage. For the more regular hotel visitors, so the monthly, which are in the darker shade here, the monthly UK hotel visitors, you can see they're much more likely to want to engage with the tech. So pretty much everyone would like the ability to have an in-tablet device. But when you move lower down this chart to things like tech lounges, online concierges, it's those regular visitors that are looking for those. So pretty much all of those tech solutions, the consumer desire for them doesn't drop below 60%. And in relation to automated check-in, check-out, the research found that 46% of consumers would prefer to check in or out with in an automated fashion. Actually, usage is low relative to that. So 30% of consumers have used automated checkout during the year. Again, something we might talk about later, but I think this is an area of a pain point for consumers. They said they don't like waiting, particularly when they want to leave. So I think we'll see that adoption only increase. We've obviously seen a growth in unmanned and smart hotels. We thought it'd be interesting to explore that. Particularly, they clearly have a place in the hotel ecosystem, but that question of why people are unlikely to stay in an unmanned or smart hotel. Number one was wanting that human interaction. So people in the whole want a tech where it's applicable, but also like that human interaction. So that does put some people off. Appreciate I'm not having to go at this model. It can be right for certain settings and for certain types of consumer. Number two is about the concern that perhaps people will lose jobs. Number three about cleaning and how efficient that's going to be. But actually number four, I don't like using technology, is quite low. So it's not that people don't like using the tech, but they do desire some level of human interaction. So I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's that balance. And we delved into the techs that people expect to see in the future. So we already talked about automated check-in, but some of the other things coming up are room service for ordering drinks and food via an app, digital key with your mobile phone, biometric room keys. So I said people are quite receptive to new areas of technology, robot concierge, the delivery of food to rooms, which doesn't necessarily need that human interaction as well. So we're only going to see this increase. The desire for tech is probably more about what's feasible, what's cost effective, but from a consumer perspective, they're really receptive to the use of tech in the right areas. So I'm going to bring Stewart in a second, and we're going to kind of sum up across 5 areas how we think the hotel experience can be improved and how operators can drive bookings. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a second and hopefully bring in Stewart. So bear with me while I try to press several buttons at once. So hopefully I've stopped sharing at this point, but Stewart, can you see my slides as a test?
I can't see your slide, no. I can just see you, my friend.
Good. So yeah, just as I said, we perhaps have a chat through these 5 areas. So given we've taken the slide away, the first one is around offering promotions, and clearly we're in a situation now where household budgets are under pressure, so people are quite price sensitive. As I said earlier, price is one of the key drivers, and we again saw from the research that around 4 in 5 consumers would be encouraged to visit a hotel again if they had were offered a discount, for example. So from your perspective, particularly from a zonal, but also your experience as a hotelier, what thoughts have you got on that area?
I think in terms of promotions, I mean, everything in terms of marketing, I always take it back to one thing, excuse me, and it's about building a community. And I think if you've got a promotion, it's to bring me directly into your business or bring me back directly into your business. And I think it's a reward for loyalty. And we talk to hoteliers a lot, obviously with high-level software. And one of the things we always say is, you know, if I said to you 20% off to come direct, and you balk at that idea, look at what you're paying to the OTAs. Now the OTAs, let me clarify, with some great success with OTAs and continue to do so, but it's a tap and it's a segment, and that direct booking loyalty should be rewarded with a promotional element to bring you back to go to your website. And I think you touched on before when you said it was 81% of people look at the amenities on the website as well. That's just to make sure that's right when I come back to your website also. Yeah,
no, interesting. Yeah, and the second one we had was about sort of actionable, was being responsive, and again, I kind of touched on it, that need to be really quick in responding to emails. And you know, again, we tend to look at things from a stats perspective, and the stats were that 42% say good responsiveness to messages and emails will encourage them to book directly. So again, about that, trying to get people to book directly, and the incentive to do that, responsivity to feedback, whether that's negative or positive, is important. How do you see that? Yeah.
And I think when you look at the stat that you read out before, people are booking through social media. So the element of the social media that you're giving on a booking link is working, but then they want some reassurance that that's worked. They still want that, you know, this has worked. Totally. that's come through. So that's one element. But I think in terms of feedback, you have to actively respond to everything, good and bad. Now, a bad comment is an opportunity to improve. So you thank them for that. And you say, look, you know, perhaps this is what we've rectified in response to your comment. I thank you. And if you come back, please do so directly, and I'll show you how we've got it better. And I think a good comment, obviously, is gold. It's absolute gold. And in previous lives, I've incentivized people when they've had their names mentioned on TripAdvisor and such, and obviously other platforms. And that's a positive as well. And I think if you know you've got some good feedback, ask for it, for goodness sake, and get it on your website and get it on your social media and use it as again, it's a reassuring element for that guest to come directly to you. The score on the OTA is a driver, but on your site, you haven't probably got a score, but what you have got is customer testimonials, great social media, clear feedback.
Yeah, and I think I mentioned earlier that there is actually quite a lot of trust in hotel websites. So I think once you get people on there, then there's the opportunity to persuade them. I think the other thing about feedback is being incredibly timely about it, isn't it? People don't like waiting for a response.
And you've got to respond to all, and timely, and you know, you've got to be seen to be responding to all. I think when you talk about the website again, I find that really interesting. I've led a huge website rebrand in a previous life, and it's a very interesting process to go through. And you must always remember you are fighting against somebody that's taking away, you know, Stewart's Hotel in Yorkshire. Somebody's trying to take that away from you to get in front of that website. So your website's got to be more than just a booking platform, which we can do for you. It's got to be a source bank, and it's got to be something that, you know, I need to have a reason to come onto your website. Perhaps, you know, you're telling me about what's happening. I'll say Yorkshire because I'm a Yorkshireman, I'm sat in Yorkshire, but, you know, an A-lister was spotted in Yorkshire last week in a pub that you wouldn't expect necessarily to see an A-lister. But that's interesting to me, and that'd probably be interesting to people that would evangelise about your product if you got that out in front of them and drove them to your website via that.
Yeah, no, great. I'm interested to know who the A-lister is, but maybe you'll share that with us later. The third takeout we have is around leveraging social media. And again, the stats touched on how important that is. Facebook and Instagram, people are looking at that before they go. People have an appetite to book, but we're actually seeing very low booking levels. And the button was one example. I think 43% of consumers would like the option of a button to reserve direct, and it feels like a really important part of that booking journey now, and perhaps underutilized.
Yeah, I think it is. You know, again, in a previous life, I created a newsletter community during the pandemic, kind of by accident, if I'm honest. It was just trying to talk to people that we knew at some point would come back when things got easier. And we got to a point where we had 80,000 subscribers. Now, social media, I think, and you know, there's people that use it much better than I heard it, but for me, it was a reassurer. It was a reassurer that if I click on, I can say, oh, there's a nice plate of food, there's a great bed, this is what we can do. And I think I spent a lot of time and effort telling people what they could do with their leisure time, because it's so precious. And I didn't really talk about the hotels. I talked about what you could do. You know, you could go to this art gallery, you could go to that exhibition, or, you know, your family could do this. And then we reassured it with the social media. And that newsletter community was so powerful in a way, because we didn't talk about the hotels. We just said, this is what you can do in Yorkshire, as it happened to be. And then perhaps if you wanted to stay, you'd think of us. And the social media reassured all that. And then the social media took care of feedback, and the social media is very, very powerful for events and ticketing and all that kind of thing as well. But the main driver that we did was to give authentic content that you wouldn't have through perhaps an OTA that's got the images that you've given. It's authentic content that gives an insight into your business that they can't do. And we're talking about revenue, so we do have to put our OTA hats on authentic stories that they can't give. And you know, perhaps Stewart and Karl today have done a webinar, and we talk about that and post on it and use it as some pillar content. And then it's an authentic voice. And the main thing we did was add value. Now, adding value doesn't necessarily mean discount, discount, discount. It means giving you insight into what you can do with your time with us. Now, these OTAs aren't going to go into the minutiae of what you could do if you visited X, Y, and Z, that you can do. And they don't have a team of people that live in that area that visit places that might be of interest that you can do. And that was very, very powerful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point about adding value in different ways. Yeah, and you mentioned about, we talked about price and the sensitivity around price, but actually we do a lot of research around that. What does price mean, and what does value mean, and and actually people aren't necessarily looking for cheap and cheerful. There is a place for that, and the budget hotel's doing well, but they still want value, you know, what they perceive as value for what they get.
I'm trusting you with my weekend. It's precious time that my family, I'm trusting you with it, so I want to know as much as I can how good it's going to be, which brings you back to the review sites, and it brings you back to the reassurance of a great website, it brings you back to the reassurance of strong social media. And I think there's some nuts and bolts things that I'm just going to rattle off because they might be of use to someone. So a tool like Canva, where you can design things for a very reasonable fee a month, and you can create and purpose your social media. I would be on the sites where you think your customers are. You'll have an idea of what your customer demographic is. You know, you don't need to be on all of them. People might disagree with that. You know, you could argue that you could bring people into another platform and get the next generation of bookers or whatever, but be where your customers are. And I think Facebook overwhelmingly on that data was the lead place to be to move people through to a hotel website. Schedule content. You know, you can schedule content in batches with tools that are available and set that up for the month if you wanted to, and then add in between. And get a content calendar. And you know, I think I might have seen today was Yorkshire Pudding Day, or yesterday was Yorkshire Pudding Day. Actually, it's every weekend in our house. But that type of thing is worth a post and a link and a story about your chef's best Yorkshire pudding recipe, just at the top of my head. So be where your customers are and give them reasons to click through. That's what social media is for.
Agree. So moving on to the fourth one, which is about focus on food. And we work, as well as with hotel groups, we work with a lot of pub, bar and restaurant groups. And that desire for quality food, we're a nation of foodies now, and people are interested in what they're eating, they're interested in sustainability of it, they're up for trying new flavors. So I think it's a big area, and what the research is saying is that actually hotels could do more here. Collectively, as I said, there's going to be standout examples which are kind of led around food, but it shouldn't be just an add-on. And to me, if you've got 40% of your consumers, you know, ordering deliver in rather than using your restaurant or even your room service, that feels like a missed opportunity. And there was a few ways that the research touched on: online menus, positive reviews. Again, back to that, would encourage people to use the restaurant, as well as maybe some sort of discount or value add, you know, from them booking. But don't know if you've got anything to add on that, having had that experience.
Yeah, I've certainly been lucky to work with some people who have really knocked hotel restaurants up a gear in the past. And I think one of the things we always say when we have a strategy session with hoteliers now is everybody wants outside capture to a degree, but they're not targeting the people that are staying as well as they are the people that live down the road. And that's the first port of call, really. I think natural friends, and I think make sure you're converting the diners that are staying in your hotel. And in previous lives, I would have incentivized reception. I would have ensured that even my housekeepers, as they walk past guests, knows what the daily specials are and how great the food is because we've given them an opportunity to try it. And I think if you get that sense of pride and communication, if you get to a point where your housekeeper's telling a guest in the corridor how great, you know, the Friday special is, you're in a good place. I think the other thing I did from an operational point of view, and again, this does relate to savings and efficiency, is we always try to do sort of 15, 20 things really, really well, rather than 55 things not so well. And I think, you know, there's no reason why those 15, 20 things can't be available anywhere at any time if you've got people in the kitchen that can all do them. And I think there's no reason why, if it was on room service, I'm penalised for having a lesser offering because I'm in my room than I am if I sat downstairs. That doesn't really make sense to me as long as you've not got transit issues. And, you know, people can sit in the steps outside and have scallops if that's what they want to do. You know, there's no reason why that can't be available, I don't think. Interesting, isn't it? I think there's possibly, I mean, hotels are busy beasts, and possibly the F&B historically was an afterthought, and possibly it was a nice to have, whereas I think it's much more of a driver now. And I think it's got to be right, and I would always encourage anybody that would care to listen to me rattle on to do those 15, 20 things really well and have them available at any point. And if you can add in some sort of locality to that, even better. You know, it doesn't have to be a high cost item. It can be as simple as some honey from up the road on a dish.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the final one, before we bring in Sarah and see if we've got any questions, is around finding the right balance of tech. And obviously, Zonal is what you do, but
Yeah.
the research clearly showed there's demand for tech if it takes away pain points. People do still want the consumer interaction, sorry, the people interaction as well to an extent. And I think it's definitely going to depend on your customers and understanding your hotel guest.
Yeah.
And I think the report itself will delve into that in a little bit more detail. But yeah, there's clearly demand, particularly if it gets rid of a frustration.
Yeah, and there are so many things you can do. And I literally grew up in hotels and have seen the pain of busy check-ins and check-outs and restaurant queues and that type of thing. We always say, I'll caveat that, we always say when we talk to people, the right amount of tech, the right number of highly skilled, multi-skilled people is the best way forward. And I think there's nothing offensive to me about filling in some of my check-in form on my phone before I arrive, and then possibly finishing the process on screen and having one really great person there fielding 4 screens rather than 3 stressed people with a key out the door. That isn't offensive to me in any way. I don't know how you feel about it, Karl, but I'm happy to self-automate that process. More so on the way out, I find it incredibly frustrating when I've got to queue to leave. And I think those things can be automated really easily. And the right amount of tech. It was interesting that comment actually, I picked up on it obviously because we're a tech company, but the 45% of people that are worried that people might lose their jobs, that's interesting to me. You can understand that to a degree. However, there's a hiring crisis going on. And I think if you've got great personalities and you can make their life easier by giving them a suite of tools that all communicate and work beautifully and seamlessly and add value to their working day, and I might add, if you have the right tech, you can multi-skill those people and encourage retention and engagement and that person's career journey. It's a very powerful thing. And if I had my time again and I was running a hotel, there are certain things that I would do straight away that I know about now with the luxury of a bit more experience in the tech world.
Yeah, no, it is interesting, that one. And I think it was also, there was one about people supporting businesses. So I think generally, the population wants to, they care about staff and they want to see staff treated well. They care about our businesses, which is great to hear. So maybe that's also something that can be brought through in the messaging. And it's like you say, you can just repurpose staff in other ways to enhance the experience. So I totally agree with that. I think there's also an option with all this tech to capture more information about consumers, and that might sound a bit big brother, but that also allows you to have a better one-to-one relationship with consumers, understand more about their habits, tailor your promotions, obviously in your communications, but also maybe tailor your offers. So I think there's an opportunity there with the correct use of tech as well.
There is, and I think if you were talking about maximising profits, which we are, you'd have a very vested interest in seeing who's coming into your hotel and from where, and making sure that you had some sort of agreement with Stewart's car company to make sure that those people always come back. And I'd be very interested to ask the people who have booked via an OTA how they arrived at our hotel and for why, and are they coming back, and would they like to get a promotion to come directly next time. And I would be enormously interested in making sure that anybody that's ever touched our business has been recontacted and revisited for any reason. That's a good place to start.
Yeah, tech allows you so much more to capture so much more information on consumers, doesn't it? Should we bring in Sarah then, because I think she's been waiting patiently and is helping out facilitate this. So.
Hi, Sarah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Stewart, and thank you, Karl, for that. A mass of information, a mass of really interesting statistics. I feel like we should kind of just look at some of those again, really, because some of those single pages just has got so much information in it. But I'm going to start. We've been inundated with questions, so I don't even have a chance to take my breath, really. So I'm going to go through the obvious kind of questions first, if that's okay. So we've had someone who has sent a question about a tech lounge. What is a tech lounge, please, Karl?
So it's basically a room, for want of a better phrase, a lounge within the hotel that allows you to do things like almost like an online concierge. So wanting to print facilities. Stewart, from your experience, you might have more to add on that, but it's a really tech-enabled lounge, and particularly I think appeals to the business visitor but also very appeals to that regular traveller as well.
100%. It's a business hub. It's somewhere where if I needed to, the printing's a big thing when you're traveling. If you needed to.
Yes.
Today I'm going to a hotel after this, but I've chosen to do this from home because I want to make sure the Wi-Fi is great and all those kind of things. So it's those reassuring elements. Again, if I've got a tech hub, I might have to get over there.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, hopefully that's kind of answered that one well. The other question that I've had is about some of the questions. So one person that very interestingly has asked, were the people asked, the people being surveyed, given the answers and made to choose their answer, Karl? I think this is a technical question, how you've gathered this information, because the question here mentions, one of your questions referred to feedback, and the menu isn't good, but also there was a lack of variety on the menu. So are those questions, were they given to the people being canvassed in advance?
Yeah, in most cases, yes. So we do have some free-form questions, but in most cases we bucket them off, and clearly there's some overlap, or some questions that ask that do sound quite similar, and some of that is the way we survey design it as well, to make sure that we're not leading people down a certain direction. So we ask the same similar questions in different ways to capture those points. But yeah, we design the survey. There are limited question options, because otherwise it just ends up as a big long list of 1,000 different views on things. That said, we do some free form questions, which allows us to capture things that we might have missed because we don't want to be too assumptive. But that's typically the way it works.
Yeah, and that person asked for a refresher on how many people were surveyed. Did you give us that information?
So yeah, so there was 2,000.
3,000.
2,000.
3,000. Right. Okay. Thank you.
2,000. Yeah, and it was it was a nationally representative sample of 2,000 consumers, and by nationally representative we mean it obviously represents the country, but that's cut by gender, age, region, so that we make sure that we've got views of people from Yorkshire and Scotland and South West and so on. And you mentioned, Sarah, about the stats. I appreciate, wanted to make sure we had time for discussion, so I went through it relatively quickly, but obviously the report will be out, and that will allow people to digest the stats in more detail. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that there are going to be so many people that want to just pore over some of those statistics, because it's all actual empirical information. And when was it gathered? Was it just in the last few months?
Yeah, so December and January. So yeah, it's
right.
Fresh information. Really reflects how consumers are thinking now. And as I mentioned, it's consumers that have visited a hotel in the last six months at least
right.
once. So it's bang up to date. And I think we agree. I mean, that I guess we would be, because that we do data insight, but we all have opinions on what's going on in the sector, and this brings a kind of data point to each of those questions.
Excellent. Okay, so a question's come in here that I'm going to read because it's quite lengthy. So this person is saying that these are fascinating statistics, but I'm very aware that I may represent a different dynamic age-wise to your discussion. However, we are very active as a client base, and many findings I personally would not consider relevant to me personally. We do very much still value personal interaction at all levels. So while I think some of your statistics lent to the fact that perhaps the younger generations don't want that interaction, obviously this person is stating that it's very much that many of us do. And what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, we talked about the tech, that it was a balance. I think there was a lot of people, particularly when we were looking at those unmanned hotels, very clearly came out that people want that people interaction. I think that Stewart talked about it's using people in the right way. So I don't disagree with that. It's about understanding your customers that are right for your hotels. In the report, when it comes out, that also delves into some of those demographic differences.
Yeah,
it's not quite as simple as your demographics, but there are definite patterns. As you said, younger people much more comfortable and wanting to engage with tech. Regular hotel goers equally much more wanting to. They're probably familiar with the whole process, so they don't need as much help. And older people, without over generalizing, are more interested in that personal service. But yeah, that's explored in a bit more detail in the report as well.
Yeah, and it is interesting as well. It depends on which bit of the hotel you're talking about. You know, perhaps check-in, I want to be nice and quick because I want to get on with my weekend and get on with having fun with my family and doing lovely things. But there again, when it comes to dinner, I quite like a sommelier to come and show me the wine list and to chat through some of the wine. So I think it actually needs, it almost needs even further delving, doesn't it? And to see, you know, when it's right to be hands-on and to have the human interaction, and when not to.
Yeah, the right time.
Yeah,
the right time. It's right for your property.
Yeah, and it is hospitality at the end of the day. You know, so that's what, you know, having that right amount of hospitality in the right way. It's a skill, isn't it, to offer that and not to be intrusive. In the same way that tech can do that, tech can facilitate that, but making sure that's not intrusive as well.
Yeah, and the technology means that jobs that need to be done can be done quicker, and then you can focus on the hospitality. That's how I always.
Always, all these things can be automated to a degree to free up the time for that personality and that locality ambassador, and that person that does know what you meet was sourced, and that's what it's for. It's to complement those great people who are hard to find.
Yeah, absolutely. So this comment, again, this is more of a comment than a question, but I've now listened to you and I'm very interested, but I'm concerned that a large number of older people do not use these sites. And by these sites, I presume this person's talking about the social media sites. You know, do we need to work hard to encourage them to use these sites to see what we're doing? And to promote the good work that the hotels are doing, or what do you think?
It's an interesting point. I think it'd be very interesting to see the customer demographic of Facebook. I know, you know, my grandparents are on it, and I think it's a reassurer, and that reassurer, and it comes back to the point I made before of being where your customers are. You know, a certain demographic, you could argue, probably aren't going to be on TikTok, but they might be on Facebook, and I think that's where you tailor your effort, your time. In terms of encouraging people onto there, I'm not sure that's the hotel's job, but it's certainly their job to provide those content pieces to engage with if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think it's also about choice, isn't it? You want to offer a range. Not every touch point is right for everyone. I think we did some research in the past, and I know TripAdvisor, you know, that's different, but that's a social, and older people perhaps more likely to read reviews in TripAdvisor. So it's complicated because there's so many different touch points. I also in one slide mentioned about some people like to ring the hotel to book, some people like to use travel agents. So, you know, getting that right, understanding your brands, your customers, and what's the right mix for those people. But we're certainly not advocating doing everything on social. That's the only way. It's a key part of the ecosystem now, and it's growing, but it is just that, it's part of the ecosystem.
And I think one of the key stats, which is quite overwhelming, when you look at 87% of consumers surveyed said they would look at the hotel's reviews before, and that is social media. However,
absolutely, yeah, excellent. Okay, so this member has asked a question. Yes, I book holidays and I wish to stay in places where there are, you know, trends are happening or what have you. And their question is, can you just tell us what your definition of social media platforms is? So how wide is the definition of social media? What do you think, Stuart? What would you consider?
For a hotelier, it's back to that point of being where your customers are. I think the big three were mentioned there, which would be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and then you purpose the content down to make sure it sits on all of those. I'm not sure of the benefit. I'd be really open to somebody pointing me elsewhere. I don't think every hotel needs to go on every platform. I think it's, again, back to where your customers are. So if you haven't got a Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and possibly if you're a wedding business, a Pinterest to show and allow clients to create, that would be a mistake. And I think having run several hotels, that was definitely something we focused on to drive people through the door. I'm not even on TikTok. I've possibly tipped the barrier into becoming too old now for that kind of stuff. But you know, certainly you will almost definitely benefit from having a presence on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah, and I think you've made such a good point. You know, find out where your customers are and focus on that one, doing that one well, rather than trying to do everything.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, and optimizing your search. It is complicated. There are so many different ways.
Absolutely.
But ultimately, you've got a funnel to drive customers to, and you know, there's only so much time and resource that people have got, so you maybe can't engage fully with all of them, as Stewart said, about picking what's right for you. But I think that the use of social is only continuing to grow, so I think you can't ignore it.
Yeah, and you've got to have the time to engage, as we've mentioned with the reviews. If people are talking about you on Facebook, for example, you need to be there to respond, and you can't do that.
That's key, actually. Yes, because nothing worse than having a presence and not responding when people are making comments or observing or complaining or something like that. Excellent. Good. Okay. So thank you for that. One of our members today has talked about Insta, and it sounds like they realise that they themselves are not very good at photography and taking classy, edgy shots that are Instagram worthy. So what they did was to create various opportunities that are photographable and encourage their customers to photograph and post themselves, to almost become well, it sounds to me like it's a free marketing and PR opportunity there, getting your customers to do that on your behalf. Good idea, Stewart?
Great idea. And in a previous life, one of the things, I didn't do this one actually, but I'd like to claim it. In a stairwell, a horrible stairwell, and I just put a graphic up of the locality, and people used to then Instagram themselves against this huge graphic that actually covered up a rather unpleasant concrete wall at the base of the staircase. And that was a little stroke of genius. And I think, yeah, we've certainly encouraged people to selfie frame events. I've certainly encouraged people to follow trails around towns to tag us in. And I've certainly encouraged people to always send us a selfie if they're having a good time. But that staircase one sticks out because for the price of the graphic, it was a really good move.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Okay. So let me just see if there are any more that have come in. Oh, yes, this is a good question. And I'd like, yes, this is a nice succinct question. What is the difference between an influencer and an aggregator? There were two words that you used in the research, Karl.
Yeah, I mean, influencers is more of the social side again. What we're talking about here is using social media, Instagram, Facebook. Excuse me. When I was talking about aggregators, I was thinking more about the booking sites, the third-party booking sites, where obviously you can get bookings for. As Stewart said, you know, we're not here to criticise them as such. They play a role, but that's what I meant by aggregator, because you go to that as a consumer, and you see an aggregate of lots of different hotels. If you go to say booking.com or hotels.com, so that's the terminology I was using.
There's a stat on this slide to elaborate on that. So 53% of those people surveyed said that they prefer to use an OTA website than your own. What you're doing with your social media is giving people a reason to be in your infrastructure, in your journey, because you can't compete with their scale, but you can compete by giving content or great photos or something, just a behind the scenes selfie. And you know, it doesn't have to be the most orchestrated photo shot you've ever done. I've gone viral in previous lives, so to speak, with things that you would never have thought would have done that. But it was just something that somebody liked. It was probably a chef holding, you know, some rhubarb at Yorkshire rhubarb. That's, I think, it doesn't have to be orchestrated. It doesn't have to be overthought. It just needs to be authentic and give value and speak to the audience in the right place.
Yeah, and ideally build up that personal relationship. Like Stuart said earlier, I think once you may get a booking through a third party, like booking.com or aggregator, or whatever you want to call it, but you've still got an opportunity when they're in your hotel to engage with them and build up that personal relationship, maybe to capture their details, you know, give them an offer to come to book direct for you next time, which doesn't really cost you anything because you're already giving that money to the third party. So you have an active opportunity to engage with that consumer, build up that personal relationship. And
absolutely. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Excellent. Okay, the next comment or question, really, and I'll read this directly out because I want to get it accurate. So basically, this member is talking about that currently they are dealing with guest feedback and complaints in the customer sales department of their hotel. I have to place a daily focus for my team and the operational teams to avoid using templates to answer at least the negative feedback, which I think is a brilliant thing, because the last thing you want to do when you're complaining is to see the same old phrasing come out. So I think that's a huge tick in a box there. Almost every time, and of course though that does take a lot of time and effort and creative thinking, as I think this member is about to go on to say, but almost every time it tends to make things worse. And I wish there was something that I could do to do this better.
Responding to advice makes things worse, as in it exacerbates the comments and they keep going.
It seems like that is the observation there.
If they're on a social platform and they're really unhappy, get them off it and get them talking to you directly.
So that's the first thing, is it, Stuart? To get them, so to respond officially online on social, but then to invite that person to engage with you privately.
I'd love to have
private chat.
You know, we're in hospitality. If we've got it wrong, I want to fix this. Please can I have a call with you at your convenience, and we'll take this offline. If they're just upset and keep going, that's damaging. Acknowledge it. Talk online. And I think the other thing that flagged there, if there's a team responding to things, be really careful. Only have a couple of people. I know we're all limited and stretched, but you want to get the tone the same as well. You want to make sure the messaging is comparative. And if David and Andrew are completely wildly different in how they approach things, it might do more harm than good. And certainly a blanket template answer isn't smart, because I'm just going to say the next blanket template answer they've given me. Be authentic, hold your hands up, have a chat off the platform. You know, we're not perfect.
Okay, well that makes sense. So the key thing is there, be authentic, respond quickly as well. I remember you saying earlier, but then invite the conversation to continue offline.
100%. Ideally in person if you can, and you know, get that across.
Yeah, and I think that point of tone of voice is important. To be consistent, to not have a template and be consistent is difficult, which is why I suppose having less people could drive that consistency. But it's also being true to your brand, or how your hotel is. So if you're a boutique hotel, you might respond differently to if you're a pub with rooms, to if you're a corporate. And it's understanding what your brand represents and what you want to represent and responding in that way. But definitely doing it timely and getting it offline is a good shout, Stuart. I think
yeah, and I suppose if you think of that logically, that's the difference between having a complaint in the middle of the reception area with everyone listening, or taking that person to a private office, inviting them to sit down, perhaps offering them a drink and discussing their complaint in private.
We've worked in hospitality. If you get somebody to sit down, they've got themselves psyched up. If you get them to sit down, have a coffee with you and say, look, we've got it wrong, I'd really like to fix this for you, how can I do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there's one more comment. If we talk really quickly, we can get through. And again, I think this is again more of an observation, and I'm really pleased that we're getting these kind of observations through, because often if one person is thinking it, then everybody is thinking it. So this observation is regarding the booking platforms, and this person is suggesting that the ones that they have available are things like hotels.com, Expedia, Trivago, and booking.com. Are those the main ones, would you say, Stuart, Karl?
Yeah, I mean, other platforms are available, but yeah, certainly they're the ones that you hear about.
Right, and the observation, I think, is I, in common place with my contemporaries, use these sites and we use them direct, but we don't negotiate with them. Are we alone in that? So I think the question might be, should the operators be negotiating harder with these agencies, these aggregators?
I have in the past, and let's be fair. I've had some phenomenal success by using OTAs at the right time as well. But I think, yeah, I've certainly negotiated commission. I think we always played the game, and you get penalised. And obviously, if your content isn't great, it goes down, as everybody probably knows. And make sure you optimise. Have a good relationship with your account manager. And if you can have a conversation about production and return and commissions, do so. It's your world to do so in. It's a difficult one, difficult conversation now, but it's definitely worth opening. And it comes back to giving me a reason to come back to your hotel directly because you've
Yeah.
got me into your communication infrastructure.
Excellent. Karl, anything to add on that?
No, not really. I
No.
think Stuart's covered it now.
Brilliant, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to end with one last comment, and I think this is a really good observation. So basically, this listener this afternoon is saying that they often can't reduce rates for their hotel. So instead, they try and give a little bit of something special if people go direct. So, for example, a free upgrade, a drink, or indeed a cookie in the room. And I think anything that ends with a cookie in the room, I think is a brilliant place to end and a brilliant observation. But Stuart, would you agree that that is obviously an alternative to a reduction in price, is something special when you get into the hotel?
100%. We're always maximising our room rates. That's what we're in the business of doing, and we want to make sure that there's added value to make sure that person has enjoyed their stay to a sufficient level of what they feel they've paid. And anything that you can do, it's a simple, you know, people write on walls and maybe not walls, windows, you know, welcome notes and anything to show a level of care. And Karl and I were talking before. I think one of the things that technology is brilliant at helping you doing is recognising when Mr. Moss has come back. And I think that's super important. And I think, you know, in a busy hotel, let's make sure we've got the CRM in place to recognise those people who have come back and give them that level of added value appropriate to their stays in your business.
Yeah, but everyone loves a personal touch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I mean, all these questions are always so good to hear. Thank you so much to everybody who has sent in questions and observations. We love having this interaction and this opportunity to put these questions and to grill our panelists. And you've done a brilliant job of grilling them today with some really tricky ones. So thank you so much to everyone who's joined us today. Thank you so much to Stewart and Karl for taking us through what is a mammoth piece of work and making it that much more accessible for us all. So we really appreciate the care that you've taken over today's webinar. So thank you both very much too.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Ron.